it's amazing how often I run into believers who, because something is going wrong in their life, they think somehow they've done something against God or done something wrong with God, or in some way have disenfranchised themselves from having God's blessing. And that can be amazingly debilitating, because if you're running around looking for something that you might have done wrong when you didn't do anything wrong, you just drive yourself crazy, and worse, you feel so distant from God. And I've heard it out there. I mean, I know there's teachers out there that are saying, if you're really walking with God, things are going to go well for your life. If you're really walking with God, things are going to go smoothly in your life. You know, that just isn't true. You know, the Bible tells us that the devil is the god of the world, and there's a huge war going on in the world around us between good and evil. And so you and I need to be prepared for evil to occur to us, even if we're not at fault. And, you know, one thing I can say about that is it's certainly all through the Bible. There's way too many records of this for me to begin to expound. But let's start with just a couple, shall we? Just to see this in Scripture, because it can calm our heart when something goes wrong in our life. It doesn't make what goes wrong right. It doesn't make what goes wrong in our life any easier to take. But at least we know we're not fighting God. And that helps a lot. It sure does. Let's go to Luke chapter 1. Here's a great example from the record of the birth of Christ. It says in Luke chapter 1, verse 5, in the days of Herod, king of Judea. And I like how it says that. You know, in the days of Herod, because Herod was a terrible king. He was very cruel, an amazingly cruel tyrant. And yet it was in his days. And what does Luke 1 tell us? That even if the government's messed up, even if there are things around you, you know, that are cruel, that are heartless, that are evil, that God can still work. And so here in the days of Herod, king of Judea, there was a certain priest named Zechariah of the priestly division of Abijah, and he had a wife of the daughters of Aaron. So Zechariah is a priest, and he married a priest's daughter. And in the culture, that was considered a double blessing. So this is a guy that should have been really blessed. But is that really what happened? It says, her name was Elizabeth, verse 6, and they were both righteous before God. My gosh, now, not only were they both priests, so they should have had a double blessing, then it says they're righteous before God. Then it doubles that up and says, walking without blame in all the commandments and ordinances of the Lord. So if the teaching is out there that if you do everything right, you're going to have, you know, smooth life, God's going to smooth things out for you. If that's right, then their life should really be smooth, because they were doubly blessed, and then they're walking in the ordinance of God, and they're walking blameless. And what does the text go on to say? But they had no child because Elizabeth was barren, and they were both advanced in their days. So Elizabeth had come and gone as far as giving birth to a child was concerned. And in that culture, it was considered a curse. And women were talked about behind their back, and it was just a very tough life. Plus, you had no one to pass down all of your knowledge and the things that you accumulated in life and all that. To die without children was considered to be a terrible curse. And this was a burden that they bore. And so here are two people should have been doubly blessed, walking blameless, walking in all the commandments, and they weren't blessed in one of what would be arguably one of the most important, perhaps the most important thing in their life, having children. You know, and what does this tell us? You know, you may feel that things are not going right in your life. Okay, maybe it is because you've made some unwise choices. Maybe it is because you've made some mistakes. But it doesn't have to be. You can do everything right. And the world is so stacked against us because of what the devil does, and because the devil is the god of the world, that things can go wrong in your life. Things can not be easy. We go to Hebrews chapter 11 now. Now, Hebrews chapter 11 is arguably almost any commentary, any Bible teacher will tell you. Hebrews chapter 11 is about the heroes of the faith. Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Moses and Samson and these heroes of the faith, and they're all there. So Hebrews chapter 11, if the teaching that if you're doing everything right and if you're a hero of the faith, things are going to go right in your life, well, what should be the testimony of Hebrews chapter 11? That things would go right in your life. Absolutely. And does it say that? Starting in verse 36. Now, it did give a list of some things that went right for people. No question about it. I mean, there are things that go right in our lives, thank God. And the same is true with the heroes of the faith. And even with Zechariah and Elizabeth, there would have been things that went right in their life. But what about stuff that goes wrong? Here's the heroes of the faith, Hebrews chapter 11, and it says, verse 36, and others experienced mockings and floggings and even chains and imprisonment. Oh, I thought these were the heroes of the faith. Mockings and floggings and chains and imprisonment, and it goes on. If that wasn't enough, it goes on. Verse 37, they were stoned. They were sawed in two. That was an ancient torture. You could kill somebody by sawing him in half. They were murdered with the sword. They went around in sheepskins and in goatskins. What's that mean? They didn't have proper clothing. Well, I thought if you were a hero of the faith, God would make sure you'd have the right kind of clothing. Not all the time. Sometimes evil just stacks up against you. The attack just sets you up in a position where things don't go right in your life. It happens. They were in sheepskins, goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, mistreated, of whom the world was not worthy, wandering about in deserts and mountains and hiding in caves and in holes of the ground. And all these, though having obtained a good testimony because of their trust, did not receive the promise. And that's the promise of the land, getting the land and the inheritance and the Messiah coming for them. So here in Hebrews chapter 11, when we're talking about the heroes of the faith, what do we see? We see people who were not, they just weren't totally blessed in their life. Everything didn't go right for them. Now, but think of the resurrection. See, in the future, they're going to have so many rewards in the kingdom. They're going to have a wonderful resurrection. And that's what being a solid, faithful believer is all about. God can't promise you a great life here. And many believers don't have a great life here. They don't have an easy life here. But there'll be rewards and a wonderful life in the future, absolutely. I want to read one more section, this from the Sermon on the Mount, from Matthew chapter 5. And so Jesus here, first major sermon to the people, the Sermon on the Mount. And you think about the life and times that Jesus was dropped into, the Roman persecution of people, the Roman oppression of people, and the kingdom of Herod. And of course, Herod, by this time, Matthew 5 in the Sermon on the Mount, Herod the Great was dead, but then you had Pontius Pilate ruling over Judea, and you had Herod Antipas ruling over the Galilee. Wasn't much of an improvement as far as the government was concerned. So Matthew chapter 5, verse 10, this is almost an oxymoron. It's almost confusion. When Christ says, blessed are those who have been persecuted because of their righteousness. Really? I'm not feeling, blessed are those that have been persecuted. Great, I want to be persecuted so I can be blessed. No, it's hard to be persecuted. It's hard to go through that pressure. It's tough. It requires a real mental staying your mind, getting a grip on life, understanding the spiritual warfare behind what's going on. If you're going to be blessed and maintain a positive attitude when you're in those tough situations. But what does Christ say? He says, blessed are you who have been persecuted because of their righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. That's what really counts. You're going to live forever. Verse 11, blessed are you. Again, listen to this. It almost is an oxymoron to us. Blessed are you when people insult you and persecute you and say all kinds of evil things against you falsely because of me. Rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven. See, and there's the contrast, the future or the present. And if we're all worried, I'm being persecuted, I'm being insulted, people are against me, I must have done something wrong. No, maybe you did something right. And maybe that's why you're being insulted. Maybe that's why you're being persecuted. Maybe that's why things aren't going right in your life, because you're doing something right. You know, the interesting thing about when you're doing something wrong, if you're doing something wrong, generally speaking, you know it. If you're stealing, you know it. If you're getting drunk at night, every night, you know it. You know, I mean, generally speaking, if you're stealing cars, you know it. If you're, I mean, it's interesting that if we're doing something wrong, generally we know it. But if we're doing something right and all kinds of things are going wrong, well, no wonder we're confused. But we don't need to be. It's a fallen world, and we live in a war zone. And what's Christ say? Rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Sure, the prophets came before us, and they were persecuted, and they were insulted, and they were killed, and they did things right. So let's get out from under the cloud of condemnation. If things are going wrong in your life, just sit down calmly and think, am I really genuinely messing up? Am I really genuinely disobeying God? If the answer is yes, generally you'll know it. And if the answer is no, just buck up in the spiritual fight. Great will be your reward when Christ comes back. God bless you. Thank you so much for watching, liking, and commenting on this video. And please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of our future content. And if you'd like to consider donating to help with making videos like this, please go to truthortradition.com/donate. God bless you.